Yo, what is good, everybody? It's your boy Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me. And I am back. I'm back with part 2 of What If Deku had an RPG leveling Quirk. And normally I don't start these videos like this. Most of you know I like starting it with like a partial part of the story and then the slight intro and little things to talk about. But I wanted to rip the band-aid off of this as fast as possible. I am back from my little stint. I went off to Anime Expo. And I had a pretty decent time. It wasn't anything too crazy, but I wanted to come back and finally get part 2 of RPG leveling Quirk out. Obviously, I knew it was gonna take a while because I did this probably like 2 days before I left. So I decided to let y'all comments roll in, and I decided to take the highest liked comment, and that is by a guy or girl or whatever, by the name of Tala Nash, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I'm not going to reveal what the archetype is or what they want until the video starts, like the actual story. But nonetheless, if you enjoy, make sure to leave a like, a sub, and comment down below. Check the description below for all the links and all that good stuff. And we are back as always. And yeah, I'm not going to waste much more of your time. Let's just get right into the what if. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya has been training harder than he ever has before. Finally, though, he's given the option, a class archetype. He begins to search through all of the archetypes, deep diving into every single last one of them until he finds one deeper within one of the categories. It's under a mix of a warrior and mage type of category, other known or classified as a combat mage, or other known as a warrior mage. He begins to do a little bit of research upon this, and he realizes that magic and this world would be intertwined relatively easily. And there is a matter of fact that he can actually learn other people's powers. But that's kind of confusing. What do you mean learn? He's not so sure, so he's going to take that to the bank. More or less just think about it for now, and more or less pick exactly what archetype he wants. Picking combat mage or warrior mage does give him a base stat total of something extremely higher than what he currently is at. So eventually he'll get extremely strong. And to start off with, he starts with his like a warrior type attack. It's more of this mage-like spell that will go surround his body in this wide aura, and he'll be able to actually fight and technically just hit things a lot harder than actually he would normally. He tries this out and he actually puts a small dent into a brick wall, which is extremely impressive at the end of the day. With a little bit more time left, we would say maybe 3 to 5 months left before the UA entrance exam, Izuku would begin his training once again, training using these powers, and he wants to learn more about this whole idea of warrior mage. Maybe this warrior mage is actually, there's more to it. He begins to actually look around and walk around the area to see if he can actually analyze or maybe even somehow learn quirks from other people, eventually stumbling across someone he knows, and that's Katsuki Bakugo, his childhood friend, quote unquote. And of course they begin to kind of like remark at each other, and Bakugo is still kind of frustrated with the idea that Izuku could be going to UA and that he could have the potential to be, well, taking that first place spot from Bakugo. Nonetheless, though, Izuku doesn't really let that bother him, and he actually taps Bakugo on the shoulder, and something pops up in his HUD menu. It seems like this graphic design shows up on his right in front of his face, in extending from his forearm that it was once at. He looks at it, and it reveals that he has learned Bakugo's quirk, but not to any strong extent. Bakugo could probably blast entire cars, maybe even half a building if he really built up sweat, but it seems like Izuku's is a little different. Since he doesn't build off of sweat, and that's not how his quirk would work, it's just a flat out explosion type of power, or explosion power like a spell of some sorts, which is extremely weak, especially because he has extremely limited mana. So with a slight argument with Bakugo, he begins training all of these powers that he currently has. He has this aura around him that can make him physically stronger, which doesn't drain too much stamina because it's based off of his own willpower and keeping it up. But Bakugo's power, or at least the hybrid version of it that Izuku has, which is extremely weak at this moment, he has it to the point where it's basically draining a ton of stamina by just making a semi-big blast. The blast is probably as big as maybe a basketball, and it drains almost half of his stamina from doing it, or his mana from doing it only one time. So he realizes that using it in a very passive way would be the best way to train it, but overall training and trying to get some of these quests that he currently has under his belt, leveling up and stuff like that, would be the best approach for the UA entrance exam. But Izuku himself knows his limitations. He's not extremely strong, but by all means he's not extremely weak. Izuku continues on with his training more and more, trying to basically get as strong as possible using this new power or class archetype that he has. Figuring out that a warrior mage can actually do various things. He can actually use his aura to fly, but just as he starts doing that, he begins crashing down into the park because he realizes how much mana it actually drains. He actually starts building up more mana every time he levels up, but obviously leveling up is harder or easier said than done, and doing all this other stuff, it does help with his mana, but it's all passive. Some other types of activities could up his mana yield, but it might be from every other level or every 3 or 4 levels of that category. But nonetheless, Izuku does grind as much as possible, like he's playing some video game, and eventually is ready for the UA entrance exam. Izuku throughout this time obviously has been studying and doing his normal training, and now that he's ready, he'll tell his mother and they'll be off to basically see if he can be a future hero. Izuku would go off with his mother to the UA entrance exam, get dropped off, and she would wish him good luck. He'd walk in and he'd look around. He'd realize that he was obviously there early, but there's so many people that are going to be sitting in these seats, so many people that are going to compete with him. He keeps looking around and he goes to back up, but he runs into somebody and actually makes her fall to the ground. He immediately grabs her by the hand and flings her back up, but she kind of like leans into him. He's apologizes immediately, saying that he's super sorry, but she actually smiles and points at him, saying that she knows who he is. You know who I am? What is that even supposed to mean? She explains who she is, that she is Melissa Shield, and that she's actually here to watch the contestants. She's in the support course already based on a special request, and that she just wanted to watch out for some of these other heroes. Izuku is shocked and says that it's a pleasure in his own little awkward way, in which she slightly laughs at. Izuku is happy to basically meet her acquaintance, especially after kind of in a way copying her design, in which she says that actually accelerated her process in terms of making what is known as her half gauntlet to full gauntlet type of machine that she actually wanted to work on throughout these years. And Izuku kind of just shakes his hands rapidly, saying that he really didn't do anything. And Melissa just smiles and then just heads up to the watch area for where all the teachers and other pro heroes are currently at. Izuku, now basically in a completely awkward state, is a little jumpy around people, and especially around someone that walks in by the name of Bakugo. Bakugo kind of is right next to him and calls him a nerd, telling him to focus up and go sit down. That beating Izuku at his absolute worst is not something that he wants. He walks over to the seating and they both sit down next to each other because, well, that's where they have been assigned. They wait for the announcements to begin, and that's when President Mike arrives, explaining everything that's going to happen, starting with the written portion of the UA entrance exam. All of them kind of head off into different rooms, finishing up that exam. Izuku has a pretty easy time in terms of doing it. He's pretty smart at that, and frankly, he's probably the smartest in his class next to Bakugo, so if we're speaking about intelligence, he's probably as smart, maybe even a little bit smarter than Bakugo, depending on the way you look at it. Izuku would then head back, wait in his seats, and President Mike would greet the entirety of all of the quote-unquote future pro heroes back in. President Mike begins to explain that there is going to be a practical exam, but as Izuku is listening, he realizes how not practical this exam is. They're going to be fighting robots. What's the point of fighting robots? That doesn't really make sense to him. Nonetheless, he just continues to listen on. He then decides that he's going to actually look at everybody else's quirks, per se. Yes, he's been writing down a ton of stuff in terms of just learning about other people's quirks, but on the other hand, he kind of needs to figure out each one of their quirks, just like maybe deciding in terms of, you know, learning it in a way. Like I said before, his quirk, or his basically RPG leveling quirk in terms of the warrior mage archetype, is more or less based off of and framed around the idea that he can actually quote unquote copy a quirk, but it starts from the very, very, very lowest level, basically leading to him having to learn the quirk. So he does look around, sees some people, and sees that there are some interesting people. And he does spot one boy that has some blue hair, and his name is Tenya Ida. He stands up and basically corrects Present Mike when he didn't need to be corrected, and he looks at Tenya Ida in a kind of an odd way as he realizes that he has some sort of an engine quirk. Izuku gets kind of curious at this and actually kind of learns the engine quirk, but when he puts it within his stat sheet, it seems that it doesn't form his body at all. It's just made to make him faster. He's not sure how that works, but it does seem like when he activates it, it does make him quicker, but his stamina drains like crazy and he becomes relatively fatigued, at least in his little test run on his basically techno type of little screen that he has for his video game screen, quote unquote. Nonetheless though, Izuku gets through that little lecture that they have to deal with and heads out to the gates. Him and Bakugo are separated, and all the teachers wait in complete, basically, astonishment at watching not only some of these top students that they've heard about, but also Izuku Midoriya, the boy that was basically on path to being a support hero. Yes, he just used his intelligence to kind of figure out some things in terms of being that like technological guy, but that was never his goal at the end of the day. Of course, he probably could do some good work in a support course, but he had no intention of being a support hero. Izuku wants to be on the front lines, wants to protect everybody and make sure everyone is safe. So when that practical exam starts, all the heroes wait and stare at Izuku while he begins flying through, smashing into robot after robot after robot. He's been upgrading his stamina and his flying is slightly better, but of course he can't really go very high, especially with a large risk to actually, you know, plummeting to the ground and kind of dying. So he keeps it low and just kind of gives it a hover and basically allows himself to fly a decent faster than he would if he was just running. So he begins just smashing through the robots, and the three-pointer robot is a little bit of an issue. Izuku himself actually finds a little bit of an issue smashing through the three-point robot just because it is slightly more strong. He begins to think that maybe there's more to this. Maybe there's more that he can use to be even stronger. He's not so sure. He hasn't really tried or thought out the box that far, but nonetheless, maybe he can somehow intertwine one of these learning quirks, or a quirk that he learned, to his aura that he already surrounds himself in. That power aura that gives him, he's assuming a 2 to 3 times multiplier, at least based on the stat sheet, and basically it's all in just strength and speed. Maybe if he adds the explosion quirk or the speed quirk, it might allow him to go faster or be hit stronger, actually fight harder in general. He begins to think about this, but those thoughts are kind of thrown to the back right when he hears these rumbling of footsteps crashing into the scene. The zero pointer has been unleashed, and the zero pointer is running rampant in front of all of them. It seems as if the zero pointer is going to smash into everything, and everyone begins to run. That's until Izuku hears a small voice, a voice that he just heard in the near distance. It seems like another girl, or a future hero, is stuck under the rubble. He begins to run over, peeling off the rubble as quick as possible, trying to get her out. And he realizes that this is going to be a lot more difficult than he believed. The other robot, the giant robot, is getting closer and closer. So he decides something. He's going to hopefully be able to protect her with his aura. He begins to kind of stand over her, and she wonders what he's doing. She says that he needs to get out of the way, that he will get crushed as well, but Izuku shakes his head and tells her not to worry. Immediately the aura begins to surround both of them, and Izuku's mana begins to plummet all the way from a score of 10,000 all the way down to 100. It's plummeting at a rapid rate, and eventually he's almost out. But it seems like he realized something, that he doesn't need to combine these two powers. He just needs to amplify the one that is basically the easiest to use in terms of a passive. He begins to amplify his aura 3 times, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20. Out of nowhere, he's that much stronger, but the thing is, he only got to that strength because he tanked his mana entirely. And it wouldn't matter how much his mana he actually has, it would still plummet at a rapid rate. It's just the matter of fact that he doesn't know how to efficiently use it. He begins to protect the girl with the aura, and since he's surrounding 2 people, it is actually straining his body a lot more. The foot then comes crashing down on top of him, and it looks like both of them are squished, like flattened, like pancakes. But the thing is, they're not. The aura begins to spark up and immediately begins to tread through the electronics of the giant robot, electrifying the robot as like crazy, forcing it to fall over, and it just blows up at the chest all the way down to its feet. Izuku is on his last legs. He helps the girl up and kind of drags her to Recovery Girl. Izuku collapses and he's basically gasping for air, trying to basically recover as much as possible. His stamina and his mana begins to climb once again, but at the end of the day, it takes stamina to climb your mana, so he's limited like crazy. Izuku passes out. He's out cold. He's lost too much stamina, and frankly his mana is so low that it basically put him in a state of you have to go to sleep or else. Izuku luckily is able to recover, and eventually he'd wake up 3 days later. He's concerned about what happened. He doesn't really remember that much, just specs. He's hoping that he did enough to actually get into UA. His mother says that she's sure that he did, and that he did something better than they would have ever asked for. He saved somebody, and that's why he was basically out of commission for a while, but they said that it was really nothing to worry about. It was just a backlash from his quirk, that his quirk was basically drained of stamina and mana entirely, so that he had to get an extreme amount of rest. 3 days would pass, even to a week. They're waiting for the letter to finally arrive, and that letter finally did, and that letter would have All Might himself. All Might himself would stand tall and look at Izuku, or at least through the hologram, and tell him that he got into UA, Class 1A specifically, and that not only that, that he was the #1 student going in. And Izuku is shocked. The #1 student in the UA entrance exam? How was I able to do that? Izuku is completely astonished, but he didn't realize that yes, he might have gotten maybe mid to like lower high end of the pack in terms of how many robots he destroyed, but he also got hero points for saving that girl and doing it in a relatively really good full fashion. Izuku didn't realize this at the time. He just didn't even think about it. He just wanted to save the girl. He doesn't even know the girl's name, but nonetheless, he hopes that she's in good standings and hopefully she eventually will get into UA as well. Nonetheless though, Izuku's not really thinking much of that. He's just excited. After a little bit of celebrating and after some time of rest and ready to go to UA for the first time, Izuku gets taken to UA. He walks in and he looks around for a little bit, obviously getting there early because you better be early or you're late. Izuku looks around and just is in complete awe. Eventually though, All Might would come out of nowhere, surprising Izuku, and All Might asks him to come to his office. Izuku does just that, and obviously complying. All Might is his favorite hero, and when he walks in, he sees the same girl that he met, or at least caught from falling, and which it was kind of his fault, but nonetheless, he sees that same girl, Malicious Shields. And they introduce each other once again, and All Might explains something to him. That Melissa, she's quirkless, but actually she wanted to become an actual hero. She was envious of the idea that she couldn't do it, but something came up and allowed her to do just that. She's going to be a support hero student, but she also wants to be a hero student in either Class 1A or Class 1B, and All Might basically keeps all the information to a minimum. Izuku can tell that straight up, but he doesn't question the pro hero and his favorite hero. And he asks, what does that mean for him? What is needed? All Might then reveals that obviously Izuku is the #1 student coming out of the entrance exam, and he would like for him to keep an eye on Melissa if she decides to go to Class 1A. Eventually, she would agree to go to Class 1A because she does know Izuku and is pretty fond of him in terms of what he was able to create based off of her very, very minimal designs. And obviously, Izuku would be completely fine with this. He doesn't mind watching over her and making sure that she's good. And All Might says that they should begin training sooner rather than later. Izuku has arguably one of the more powerful quirks, and on top of that, he has such great control over it, and he's learning so much about it on his own. And then Melissa needs someone like that to actually help her out learn a quirk that she developed when she was, this late of a bloomer. Izuku looks at All Might and looks at Melissa and kind of smiles and says that he can handle it, but the whole late bloomer stuff, should he tell everyone else that, or should he make something up better than that? And All Might is kind of shocked. You realize that I know about the whole, she's not a late bloomer. She either had a quirk before and, didn't show it off because it was either weak, or they all seemed that it was non-consequential, or she got a quirk. How would she get a quirk? I don't know. But, I can make my theories if you'd like. All Might is kind of shocked. He was able to deduce all of this very quickly, and Izuku would be the person to do that. Frankly, he's extremely smart, and all of his stats have done this, and he's also has a leveling system for practically everything. If we're talking about support hero stuff, he has that. We're talking about reading, he has that. We're talking about math, he has that. So cooking, sure. Cleaning, sure. It's just part of his RPG leveling system. It's just straight up everything you can think of is there. Izuku is basically just quickly explaining to All Might how he deduced this, and All Might apologizes for trying to jump around the truth. Izuku waves his hands off and basically says that it's completely fine, that he understands. But nonetheless, he'll be making sure that Melissa is just fine and dandy, and they'll be able to train together whenever they can, or foreseeably possible. And All Might's happy to hear this, and he sends off Izuku and would send off Melissa as well to meet at the Class 1A classroom first, and then after she's done with the Class 1A hero work, she'd go to the support course. Obviously, Melissa is extremely smart, and we can make assumptions that she's probably, in terms of intelligence, far beyond what UA has already qualified for. Izuku actually asked about this, and she says that her general studies are practically already over, and she's already in third year general studies, so she doesn't necessarily need to worry about Gen Ed right at this moment. Izuku is shocked and says that he wished he could do something like that, and Melissa regards that he probably could, but he just wasn't given the option to do so. And he kind of just shrugs, and eventually they'd end up in class. Bakugo is obviously there yelling at the blue-haired boy by the name of Tenya Ida, and they make the entirety of that whole scene once again. Aizawa would eventually walk in, telling everybody to shut their mouths because they're just annoying brats, and tell them that there is no little ceremony that they'll be going to, that they'll be having a test. Izuku kind of assumed this. You're at a hero school, why wouldn't there be a test off the bats? But Izuku did not expect one thing. After he got up to the plate, launching the ball as far as possible, which ended up only going maybe 400 meters. It's good, it's really good, but it's not going to be as good as what Bakugo could do. And Aizawa asks if that was 100% his best. Izuku kind of explains that there's limitations to what he can do. He could theoretically throw it extremely far, but he'd be drained out of stamina, mana, and he wouldn't be able to recover it, so he'd be out of commission for all the rest of their tests. Aizawa hears this and kind of smiles and says that he's a smart kid. He's heard the rumors about him, and it's definitely true. Izuku nods and walks to the line, and everybody just is excited. Oh, we want to throw the ball, we want to do this, we want to do that. And Aizawa gets kind of mad, and Izuku looks at Aizawa and realizes what he's going to do, telling all of them that if they don't do their best, or whoever gets last place, will be expelled from UA. Izuku, hearing this, thinks that he's pretty serious. It kind of seems that way, but at the same time, it's weird to think about because it seems that Aizawa has a whole new method to it. But just as they're basically going through all these tests, Bakugo would eventually get out of hand, and Aizawa would reveal his quirk. Izuku, being extremely interested in it, he decides that he's going to learn this quirk, and that would actually be his last quirk he can learn until he gets a little bit stronger. By a little bit, I mean a couple, like maybe 10 levels, 15 levels, because he only has 3 slots. So he has a speed quirk, theoretically, or technically, and then he has Bakugo's quirk, which is an explosion quirk, which is a little bit different, because it's kind of like a mimic than anything. And then Aizawa's quirk, which is kind of a mimic in itself as well, so it would work slightly differently. He tries to activate the quirk, and his eyes kind of flicker for a second, but that's about it. Aizawa, seeing this, asks him what he just did, and he said that he learned his quirk, but the base level of his quirk is so little that he can't really do much with it at this moment. Aizawa is shocked and is basically taking favorites with Izuku. Let's be honest, Izuku is the only one so far that has shown that he wants to learn more or does more than just, oh well, I have a quirk, so I'm going to be strong. Izuku has been that this entire time, trying to figure out how strong he could be. Nonetheless, all of the little, practice stuff and all of the testing goes by relatively easily. Izuku actually gets second place in this regard, and he actually gets one behind Bakugo, which Bakugo is basically kind of more or less flexing on him, saying that he's the best and he's better than him and better than all these other people. But Izuku says that, getting one quirk assessment test better than him doesn't make up for the entirety of the entrance exam. And Bakugo gets kind of mad about this, and he goes blasting at Izuku, ready to land a hit, but Izuku just slips out of the way, tripping him, and everybody kind of laughs at Bakugo. Aizawa didn't even stop it, knowing that Izuku would be able to handle it, and he tells everybody to head back to the classroom, and they'll be finishing up relatively soon. The day ends relatively easy. The quirk assessment test was over, and Aizawa does reveal that there's nobody that's going to get expelled. He does see potential in this entire class, and since everybody is trying, he wants to at least keep the person that did fail, which is Hagakure. And he also feels kind of bad because she's just an invisible girl. She's kind of limited, but she's good for other things, So, like good stealth and stuff, but it's just a big thing that he would see in terms of like potential versus reality of how well they're doing right now. Izuku obviously would have his little chat with Melissa and ask if she wanted to train, but she obviously would have to head off to the support course and also handle some other business, but they do exchange numbers and plan to train together very soon. But they're going to be paired up relatively easily, or they're going to be paired up relatively frequently because, for one, All Might is All Might and he wants that to happen, but nonetheless, Izuku and Melissa would make a good partner in terms of hero work. And obviously they're both extremely smart, but Melissa does lean more into the support idea of it, and Izuku knows how to look at things that are minimalistic and create things that will make stuff or make regular people a lot stronger. Izuku has done that before, and he could do it again, even though his main focus is not a support role. Well, nonetheless, the next day, they'd be able to show how strong together they truly are. And when they arrive at UA again, it's announced that they are going to be doing a little bit of hero training. That hero training will involve All Might himself. I am here, walking through the door like a normal person. All Might comes busting through the door, and obviously he says his signature line, I am here. All Might would then explain to them that they're going to get on their hero suits and then start up their training. Izuku has a similar suit that he would in canon, but let's just say it's a little more retro, a little more like fancy than the one that he would have had normally, because his mother obviously made it with the budget that she had, but now the budget was a little bit higher, so definitely looks a lot better, and it's more suited for his aura type attacks and more durable in that regard, so his clothing won't get completely and utterly obliterated by his quirk, so that's definitely a win. They would head out to All Might, and All Might would explain that they'll be doing heroes versus villains, and this would be relatively simple. 2 versus 2, villains will be protecting a bomb, and basically if they all get captured or obviously defeated, or the hero team touches the bomb, the villains lose. If the hero team runs out of time, or they both get captured and they can't touch the bomb obviously in the lengthy time that they're given, they lose. Relatively simple, and the teams are already built up. The first team is the villains, and that is Katsuki Bakugo and Ochako Uraraka, the girl that actually Izuku saved. He didn't even realize this, and I guess she didn't see him, but they have that little like handshake and that thanks for helping her, obviously, but she didn't even realize that Izuku was the same person. It was so basically mythical in a way. His aura overwhelmed both of them to the point where they didn't even know who each other were at that moment, and frankly Izuku was just doing it on a whim. And the hero team, though, going against them would be Izuku himself and Melissa Shields. So that fight will then commence once Bakugo and Ochako were in the building ready to defend the bomb. The heroes would have 5 minutes to make their plan, and a plan they definitely did. Melissa would come up with a strategy for the attack on the building, taking different directions and using some of the gadgets that she's made to make sounds and noises in other areas to distract them relatively easily. All Might would give their countdown and tell them that they can begin in 3, 2, 1, begin. But just as that is said, we're going to be ending this part. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, sub, and comment down below. I actually realized that this was 30 minutes. I didn't even realize at the moment. I was kind of just vibing recording, but hey, 30-minute video for y'all. Nonetheless, if you enjoyed, leave a like, sub, all that good stuff. Check the links in the description. If you don't like my choice, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of just the choice I made. Maybe one of these days I'll come up with like a class that everyone likes, because I know there was a lot of like Battle Master. People like I believe it was called Beast Master as well. You guys like that one? Maybe I'll do like what if Deku had a Battle Master Quirk in the future, or maybe like what if Deku was a Beast Master. But I've done Mythical Creatures Quirk, so it's relatively similar. But nonetheless, have an amazing day, and yeah, I'll see y'all tomorrow, I guess. Later.
I don't wanna waste what's left.